And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 115th episode of the Hoosier Sounds, or the Purple Aces podcast, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, November 12th, 2019, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. It is going to be an extremely busy podcast tonight. There are a lot of even just throughout the last week of sports, but even the last couple hours of news as we've had the college football playoffs come out, and as the Purple Aces, Evansville, at the time of recording the podcast, Evansville has just beaten number one Kentucky at Kentucky, let alone going into actually what we're going to talk about tonight with Indiana football is ranked for the first time since 1994. So we're going to touch on that for a second, since it's news that has literally never happened once since all of us have been alive. But then we'll move into...
Make some of you feel old.
Yeah. We'll move into a Portland State and North Alabama recap for the basketball team. Then we will finish our game-by-game predictions for the basketball team as well, our part 2 segment. Then we will do a Penn State preview for football this Saturday, since there is a big upcoming game against Penn State on Saturday. So, as we all catch our breath, here with me tonight, all three of us are back in action again, as Nathan did not have Assembly Hall duty tonight, so he can be here with us tonight. So, everyone's here. Nathan, how are you doing since you've been on Assembly Hall duty the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, it's too bad. The last couple of Tuesdays there have been home basketball games. I had to get out of it tonight, but I'm happy to be here with you guys. I mean, the last time I was here, it felt like it was so much warmer outside, and it felt like a year or two ago, honestly. But no, I mean, like you said, no, it's just absolute craziness right now going on all over the place between Kentucky and between Indiana starting 3-0 from a basketball standpoint, and the football team being top 25, and it's just a lot of stuff. I'm going to be at Penn State on Saturday, so who knows what's going to happen.
Man, that's awesome.
Iron, so make sure you guys stay tuned to our coverage there on Indiana HQ. But there's just a lot of stuff going on, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Me too. How are you doing, Matt, in a neck of the woods where it is not 20 or 30 degrees out?
Yeah, it's a 70-degree difference between me and Nathan right now, so my apologies.
And probably most people listening too.
Anyways, no, it's great up here. Look, I've been loving the IU Hoosiers and what they've been doing in all sports this week. We were talking about it in the Slack channel for Indiana HQ. We're like, when's the last time like all of our sports teams were ranked? And it just seems like athletics this year, it's like women's basketball is ranked. I haven't even talked about them at all. We got men's basketball who's kicking butt against Northern Alabama. We'll talk about them later. We got football who's ranked. Our volleyball team is kicking butt and kicking into gear and playing some really hard opponents in
now
volleyball.
They're kicking it into gear, yeah.
And our swimming and diving team, their season's kicking off soon. So like it's crazy. Hoosiers are up in full swing of things. The semester's in full swing. I know Nathan was just complaining about midterms he had to take, and it's just a good time to be an Indiana Hoosier right now.
Yep, so let's get into the thick of it. Let's start with Indiana football being ranked, and normally we probably wouldn't be talking about Indiana football coming off of a bye week other than previewing the upcoming opponent, but there's just some news to talk about for the football team every single week, and it's almost entirely good news except for last week's quarterback talk. It's good news every week, which is not something we have literally ever seen since all of us have been alive, since obviously the news has come out. It first came out through the coaches poll that always comes out first on Sunday. Everyone was waiting and anticipating for the coaches poll about 12:30, 12:45 Eastern time, and it came out Indiana was ranked 25th in the coaches poll. News started to spread, and then just about an hour later at 2 o'clock, it came out that finally, after 25 years plus, September 20th, 1994 was the last time Indiana was ranked in the AP Top 25, and they come out as number 24, and I don't care who, with the college football playoff rankings, that was not good to Indiana, to say the least, tonight. They happened. They're finally ranked, and I think all of us are just giddy with excitement. The same amount of giddiness when the Indiana Hoosiers first went to 7-2, and we had to do an extra podcast, and we did an extra podcast for them going bowling at 6-2, and all of this, and it's just hard to contain my excitement. Yeah. Is there any other extra things that you want to add to that, Matt? Or are you just almost speechless for how excited you are for this football team?
I'm super excited. I want to know, just out of curiosity, how many seconds in between us being ranked and ranked again? Like how is it in the billions? Like I really want to know how many seconds it is. So.
And someone should do that math. Nathan, are you excited since, again, all three of us have never seen an Indiana football team being ranked?
I know. Well, I guess technically I may have seen it when I was about 2 years old, but, actually 3.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is. I mean,
Old.
Look, yeah, right. Sorry. Yeah, the gray hairs are coming. So, look, all in all, it's just a really cool moment for this program that has made an incredible amount of progress this year. And even after getting ranked on Sunday, all they've said all the right things. Yesterday in media availability, they were saying how this is not really a big deal. We're not expecting to be ranked for just 1 week. We're gonna keep this going. We're not gonna throw a party just because we're ranked 24th or 25th. So here we go. I mean, they've got a shot here. Look, IU had a bye week last week, yet they're kind of grabbing the headlines with this accomplishment. This game on Penn State's going to be really interesting. I know we're going to dive into it in a little bit, but Penn State obviously coming off a loss last week. We'll see how they respond to that defeat against Minnesota. But IU, look, everything's coming up roses for Tom Allen right now, except the actual Rose Bowl. I don't know if that's going to happen. Although
and Penix.
I don't know. Yeah, and the Penix thing. So tough quarterback news. Peyton Ramsey now stepping in, and everyone's still relatively generally upbeat. So we're going to see how this thing goes.
Yep, we will. And I do want to quickly mention, since, yes, about a few hours ago, the CFP rankings, the college football playoff rankings came out. Indiana was not in the list, and it came out a little later that apparently it wasn't even on the radar for the committee, which I think is a big question mark. When you look at a team like Appalachian State that was ranked 25th, and I can get by that, but I can't get by you ranking Appalachian State and not even discussing Indiana, when Appalachian State, they're the first Sun Belt team in Sun Belt history to beat 2 Power 5 opponents in a single season. They beat UNC and South Carolina this year, but again, it's UNC and South Carolina, and they have a loss to Georgia Southern. So if you're going to tell me that team, when Indiana has played and won 7-2 games, even though they have 2 losses, and one of them is to one of the best teams in the entire nation, I think that's a little sketchy. But then you've also got, I think this ranking in general, and we could go on for a little while with this ranking in general, but I think some highlights just to see how weird this week was is that Georgia was ranked over Alabama when Georgia lost to that South Carolina team, and Alabama lost to right now the best team in the nation. So I think everyone would have thought Alabama would have been ahead of Georgia. You got Texas going from unranked in the college football playoffs all the way up to number 19, which I think is a little ridiculous. Then people have Iowa that thought they should be all the way out, if not at 24 or 25, as a top 20 team after losing to Wisconsin. Kansas State lost to Texas, and they only dropped to 24th when out of all the other polls, they basically dropped out of the polls entirely. And then, like I said, App State completely into the top 25, when the only 2 teams last week that dropped out, Wake Forest dropped out, of course, after Virginia Tech are showing Wake Forest's true colors, and SMU actually won this past weekend, and they actually got knocked out from Appalachian State. So I think it's a crazy week for at least the college football playoffs, but if Indiana keeps, like Nathan said, if they take care of business like they've been talking about on Saturday, still a 9th-ranked Penn State team, at least in the college football playoff committee's eyes, they definitely have to get in.
It's bulletin board material. Just put that up right before we go out for kickoff. Just put that top 25 right on the door, so when they walk past it, they see you haven't earned your place yet. Go out and beat the team that apparently has.
Exactly.
And I have a question. You guys, doesn't even have to be answered, honestly, but I don't understand. Like, why does the CFP even rank 25 teams? That always seemed a bit weird to me.
Another very good question.
They're out there trying to pick the top 4. Maybe you send out a list of 8.
I can see 10.
Every
10.
week at 8 or 10.
But ESPN can have a show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess. Exactly. I don't know.
More money in the show.
It just kind of never made sense to me.
Exactly. But despite all that, again, we'll just have IU walk the walk instead of talk the talk. So, Nathan, who won the week this past week in IU sports?
Yeah, so before we dive into that kind of thing, the football and the basketball part, as far as who won the week, I'm going to tip my cap to the women's basketball team. Their season is off and running here. They're 2-0. doing pretty well. 2 lopsided wins to start the season here in Bloomington. And we got excited about the football team getting ranked 24th in the AP poll, while the women, they were ranked 21st. And that's a program all-time high. So tip your cap to Terry Morin. She's doing a great job running the women's basketball program at IU. They've got a couple of interesting tournaments coming up here in the non-conference. They get to go to the Paradise Jam down in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That should be a fun little non-conference trip where they're going to face off against a really, really good program in Baylor. They also have a road game against Florida. So it'll be fun to see what kind of strides this women's program makes this year. They've already set an all-time program record with that 21st ranking.
Yeah, which is awesome. And now to add on to that, after next week's rankings, Indiana will be the highest ranked women's basketball team in the state of Indiana. Notre Dame lost last night to unranked Tennessee. Now, Tennessee is looking good, but unranked Tennessee, they lost. Notre Dame is 15th. I definitely can see Indiana jumping Notre Dame this week. And now Notre Dame's women's basketball is not the highest rated women's basketball program in the state of Indiana, which is also crazy, let alone adding Evansville beating Kentucky. It's just a great week for the state of Indiana.
That's awesome.
A great week for the state of Indiana in general. But let's move on to some basketball recaps. We had a couple games since we had our podcast last. Portland State, the game on Saturday, did not go, I think, as people planned. The Hoosiers ended up winning 85-74, although, of course, the game was a little tiny bit farther. The score was a little bigger than what the final score says, but I think tonight a lot of those worries, or if just doubts from whatever the game happened on Saturday, which, again, was a 2 o'clock game, so everything's going to be different anyway. The game, some doubts might have been put away since the Hoosiers showed out, and they beat North Alabama 91-65 tonight. So we're mostly going to talk about the game tonight since it's fresh in our minds. We don't need to go over, I guess, a game that Indiana didn't play very well against Portland State. But Nathan, after being at the past couple of games and then watching the game tonight, how are you feeling about this team? What are you seeing at the very beginning of this young season for the men's basketball team?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this short. So far, right, they've played 3 games, all against overmatched opponents. And the good news is that Indiana's taking care of business, right? Especially in light of recent events where teams like Kentucky, Indiana took care of business against 3 teams that they were supposed to beat. The Portland State game back on Saturday, yeah, it was definitely a bit uncomfortable. They had a guy, Boo Boo Woods, Boo Boo something.
Boo Boo Wood, yeah.
He was bombing in threes from all over the place, and you just kind of went, "Wow, that's good for him." Like, is Indiana going to get Steph Curry today? No, that didn't happen. Indiana eventually slowed him down. The adjustment there was putting Rob Finney on him, and that slowed things down quickly. So you know. Indiana's 3-0. I can't draw too many conclusions at this point. It's just Indiana hasn't played anyone of significance yet, and they're not really going to until they take on Florida State in early December in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. There are some tricky games in between, like South Dakota State and Princeton, but even then, I think Indiana is going to be a pretty considerable favorite over those teams anyway. If Indiana loses, really, up until that Florida State game, we have to have a talk because IU should really handle all their stuff up until then. But I'm not expecting it to happen. From a very high level, I do like where the offense is headed right now. I know a lot of people, including Archie Miller himself, said, hey, the defense is struggling. And even tonight in the first half, IU's defense showed a little bit of weakness. But Indiana's put up at least 85 points in each of the first 3 games so far. Mm-hmm. And I like the individual strides certain guys have made, specifically Justin Smith and Jerome Hunter. Those are 2 players who are clearly the X factors on this team. I mean, other players, we kind of know what we're going to get with Finney and Durham and Joey Bryant, who knows? But as far as real wild card type players, Hunter and Smith are the 2 guys where I wasn't sure what we were going to get this year. Literally, I wasn't sure if Jerome Hunter was literally going to score a point for IU basketball this year. And he's coming out. He's knocking down threes. He's playing actively on both ends. And I like seeing that. So overall, can't conclude too much right now, but definitely some interesting strides that players have made, especially on the offensive end. The defense does have to pick it up, though.
Yeah.
Yep. in about a 2-minute segment, I think you summed it up pretty well. Matt, do you have anything else to add or some other stuff you've seen?
I mean, I loved what I've seen from Al. I'm excited to see what Devontae brings this team when he comes back, because as much as I've liked what I've seen from Armand in his minutes he's given as a freshman, he's not going to be a starter. Like, obviously, the team looks a lot better when Rob Finney's on the court. But even after that, like, as when they've played they played units with 3 guards, like aren't with the 3 of them on the court. It's never looked that comfortable. I really would like to see what the team looks like with Devontae back out there. But I really like your point about Jerome and Justin. I think Justin tonight, we'll talk about it a little bit, I'm sure, didn't have his greatest game. It played pretty well defensively, but didn't have his greatest game offensively. But Jerome really looked and played well tonight and played well in the Portland State game. So if he keeps this trend going, this is something that he can build on, and that's going to be great for the Hoosiers down the line.
Yep, totally agree. And I think even Nathan, you talked about kind of knowing what we had with Al. I'd almost disagree with that in just a slight way, because I think I don't think anyone expected Al to be doing at least as much as he's doing right now. And I think he's taken the injury to Devontae when he's been able to at least put out a little bit more. He's been able to show that he can do some stuff offensively, at least now, more on a consistent basis. So I really like the stuff that I've seen from Al. Not that I haven't liked what I've seen before, but I think he's taking it a little farther than what I might have expected, at least at the very beginning of the season. And then going off of, again, just the domino effect from Devontae's injury, Armand Franklin's been able to get a lot of really good minutes. You've seen some up and downs, but I mean, those up and downs are just freshman stuff. He's just learning the ropes of having to play college ball. So you see the kind of projections and the kind of stuff that he can do as he starts to get reps and game minutes, real game minutes under his belt. And all of us have been extremely high on this kid coming into the program. Maybe I don't think most people have been as high as we have been, but we have been really, really high on Trace Jackson Davis. And
yes,
he has just been showing up and he's been incredible in all the minutes he's given so far. And again, it's against literally sub 270 teams, but he's just shown up and done incredible stuff. And you know what doesn't change no matter who the opponent is on the line? Those free throws. 14 of 15 tonight of free throws. And first of all, shooting 15 free throws, you're doing something right on the offensive end to get to the line that many times, let alone you shoot 15 free throws in a game, no matter who the opponent is. It's a lot more than just one game minutes itself, because you see the most that people shoot from you see the most that people shoot from the line is like 6, 7, maybe 8 shots typically, and then he shot 15 and he was 14 from 15. He got 8 rebounds. He only had one fouls. Yeah, he had 2 fouls, but he had a block, which, and those guards blocking tonight was amazing. Specifically Al, but Trace, again, 3 blocks. I think, like I said before, I think he's going to average almost 3 blocks a game, which is really good. Race doing a lot of those blocks as well. We saw a lot of good minutes from a lot of people. I want to see more minutes from Duran. He was able to get some more minutes tonight, and when he was cooking, he was cooking. He was old vintage Duran, when you could tell that he's able to move at full speed and not trying to not go halfway, but you can tell that he's just not back in game shape yet. Joey Brunk's starting to come into himself. He's finding a specific role. He's not going to be a superstar, but I think he's finding a role, and he's really starting to play with that. And it's just nice. I like what you guys said about Justin, just maybe an off game for what we might expect from him, but it's the beginning of the season. People are starting to find different roles, and I think this is going to be a role-playing team that everyone fits in a spot. And like someone said in our Slack channel, I think it was Rob said, it was like this team not having any superstars, if someone gets injured, it's not as big of a hit as maybe Romeo or Jawan getting injured last year. It's just, hey, someone's going to step up and then take the minutes, and everyone knows what the role is going to be.
And on that note, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of some of the coaches that are going to go up against Indiana this year, whether it's Greg Gard at Wisconsin or Fred Hoiberg at Nebraska or whatever, Tom Izzo even, or Juwan Howard at Michigan. Yes. It's going to be really tough to game plan for Indiana this year. I think about last year, you could probably focus on Langford and Juwan Morgan, and you would kind of take care of the majority of Indiana's offense. That's not the case this year, because you're seeing now, you guys mentioned the different options. Indiana has 8, 9 guys that Archie Miller is comfortable putting out there. And then we haven't even looked at what Devontae Green can provide to this offense yet. And that's hopefully something we see sooner than later. But, you want to err on the side of caution with that kind of thing. So I think he has a hamstring injury. So you want to be careful with those at this stage of the season. So again, when I try to consider what other coaches have to game plan for now, when they look at Indiana, all of a sudden, I think I'm a little bit more optimistic today than I was, say, 2 weeks ago. But again, let's see what they do once they face a Florida State or a UConn or a Wisconsin like they're going to do in December.
Yeah, Florida State team that just beat UF in UF, number 6 UF in Gainesville. So,
but yeah, exactly like you said, Nathan. The 10 healthy scholarship players all had double-digit minutes, and that includes Deron Davis, who was able to get on the floor for 13 minutes of a team low. And when you've got literally 10 scholarship players, the only healthy 10 scholarship players you have, they're all getting double-digit minutes, and they're all finding roles, and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and they're having good lineup changes. Then that's exactly what you want. And you put Devontae, and I honestly could still see all 11 players playing. And that's not something typical that Archie Miller does, but that also shows if he's willing, instead of doing 7, maybe 8 guys, and he's willing to put 11 players on the floor every single game, that shows that he's able to change. And he's not someone that's stubborn and stuck in his ways, and he's going to change for what the team is, which I think is good for the Hoosiers in the future, which maybe some of those fans that might have been a little wary of Archie Miller at this point in his tenure, I think that's nothing but a good sign when you see especially someone like Demezy Anderson being able to get on the court for 19 minutes, score 10 points, and
2 of 3 from 3.
Exactly. Yep. Which speaking of those 3-point shots, 38.1, it was really 40% until the end where there was some garbage time. And then you look over to the free throw column. Can't overlook this. I think the highlight of the game is shooting 82.2% from the line. It finally happened. There's a game where the Hoosiers shot not just good, but they shot great from the free throw line as a team in general, because even if you take away Joey's stuff, everyone was not missing more than 1 or 2 free throws the entire game.
Yep. Round of applause for Deron Davis going 4 of 6 from the line.
Yes. No. Hey, but he's a guy that his freshman season
he was a really good free throw shooter.
Yes. Yeah. Until he got injured. So it's there.
They looked really good tonight. His free throws looked really good tonight.
Nathan, were you gonna say something?
No, I think I'm good. That is good. Keep it up. Free throw shooting's important. Got to knock them down, and I guess that's that, right? Can't be too disappointed with 82% from the line.
Going back to 3-point shooting, though, the way Jerome Hunter's shot looks off his hand is so beautiful. And he hit it was an NBA range 3-pointer in the first half that looked so pretty going through the net. He's going to be a fucking joy to watch.
Well, and he's done it for you used it for emphasis. It's emphasizing. Yes,
we got the beat button. Coming out
that's cool. It's just we're really
is that
passionate.
The first time that's happened?
We're really passionate about the kind of contributions Jerome Hunter can make. No. He did it back on Saturday too against Portland State. When if he can knock down that wing shot, he reminds me a little bit of Christian Watford, just a little. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, Matt, I didn't want to have to research how to add a beat button tonight for the first time. That's not what I wanted to have to do on my Tuesday night.
You could just take the second of audio and just clip it out and just have it be blank.
That's probably what I'm going to end up doing. But this week, the basketball kind of dies down for the Hoosiers, at least in terms of amount of games that we have from Tuesday night to Tuesday night when we record our podcast. So the only game finally from now until our next showing will be the game against Troy on Saturday, which thankfully we get to see football earlier that day and then basketball later that day. There's no overlap, so it's a nice day of Indiana sports. And then finally, thank goodness, after 3 weeks in a row, we don't have to do a podcast post-game from a scrimmage or regular game, so we can go back to normal next week. Thank you for all of those people that watch the live stream are going to be here late with us. Who knows what we're going to end up doing in December when we have 9 and 9:30 games on Tuesday. But Troy on Saturday, we get to go in depth. We'll go into that more in depth next Tuesday. Then we'll get to talk about, and we'll probably even talk about a Princeton game because Princeton's definitely a team. Now, they're not starting out very but they're a team that definitely Indiana's not going to have to look over next Wednesday. Let's move on so we can keep going through the bevy of topics that we have today. Matt, let's move on to our social media shout out. So Matt, give us your social media post of the week.
Post goes back to the football team. Congrats to getting the top 25 rankings. There was the Indiana football account immediately tweeted out, and that's at Indiana football on Twitter, immediately tweeted out, their rankings, and they already had like the graphics ready to go when the rankings came out. So props to the social media team over at IU and the Cuban Center over there. I know a bunch of the interns and the employees over there. So shout out to you guys. You don't get the recognition. You're not playing on the team, but you guys put a lot of work in for the program and do a lot of really good work over there. So shout out to you guys.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that shout out to the social media guys, because I think that part gets overlooked a lot. We see all that cool stuff and we forget about who's actually making the thing itself. So last week, even though Nathan was out, we gave you our part 1 of our annual game-by-game predictions, where if you missed the show last week, you should go listen to this segment, because we gave you each prediction of how each game will go, whether we think it was a win or loss, and how it wrapped up by the end. So we went through basically the first half of the game. We went all the way through the first game against Ohio State at home on Saturday, January 11th. At that point last week, I had a victory against Ohio State. Matt had a loss against Ohio State. Nathan with a win against Ohio State. That put my total, the overall record, I had at 13-3 with a conference record of 3-2. Matt, same thing, 13-3, conference record 3-2, but we had different wins and losses, so you have to go back and see which one if you didn't listen to last week's show. Then Nathan, just a little better, 14-2 overall record. Same thing, 3-2 conference record. All of these. And I got all of their predictions ahead of time on the show this week. It's going to seem like the overall record is very similar, but the games are very, very different. And it's kind of cool to see what all of us think. So let's get right into it. The first game, and I think it's pretty easy discussion, at Rutgers, Wednesday, January 15th. Is there any doubt that this is a loss, even at Rutgers, for this team?
No.
Any doubt?
No.
Okay.
There's no doubt that it's a win. That's what you guys are getting.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Rutgers are losers.
Okay.
Yes. I saw Matt, double negatives. I apologize. I saw Matt put an L on his head, and okay. So yes,
it's for
definitely a
Rutgers.
win against Rutgers. Yes. And now, after, we don't even need to shame them, at Nebraska, their season has, let's say, started out not the way that they have wanted it to. At Nebraska, is it Saturday, January 18th? Is that even a game that you think is going to be easier than Rutgers this year?
It's easier than the games we just played.
Wow, man.
Wow. So that's a yes for Rutgers, because I think Rutgers is a little better than the teams we've played. So again,
I think it'll be a little bit easier than that Rutgers game.
So there we go. So a win. So everyone's right now 15-3, 16-2 on the season. That's pretty good compared to the past couple of seasons.
Here's my logic on this. They're not a non-Power 5 basketball team coming into Assembly Hall, so they're not going to shoot like Steph Curry on us. So at Nebraska, we should win by a lot. True,
very true. All right, now the harder opponents are coming into Assembly Hall. Thursday, January 23rd, Michigan State comes into town. Yes, they have a loss, but they lost to now what will not be the number 1 ranked Kentucky team, but they are still going to be a powerhouse team. I predicted a loss for the start of the calendar year for them. No, that wasn't the start of the calendar year. I think I had them losing somewhere else. Anyway, had them losing to Michigan State. I think that's kind of the sentiment that we feel this year, even though Indiana was able to get 2 victories over Michigan State last year. Matt, do you agree or disagree?
I agree, but I think it's going to be a really, really close game. It'll be an instant classic, and Michigan State's going to win in a heartbreaker.
Yeah, sadly. So Michigan State pulls it out for both Noah and Matt. Nathan, do you think the Hoosiers are going to pull it out, or do you think Michigan State's going to end up coming away with it?
I think Michigan State's going to get the win. They obviously have a little emotional revenge on their minds coming into Bloomington after last year. And yeah, I mean, the Spartans are good. They lost to Kentucky, but you're gonna see that was just a sort of a blip on the radar. I think they'll come to Bloomington and win.
Yeah, Cassius Winston will be victorious in the matchup of two future Wooden Award winning point guards.
Ooh, I like that in some way. But Michigan State, you talked about the emotional side, not remembering last year. I think more their eyes are going to be set on the longer term goal, win all of the games, get a very high ranking in the tournament, and then win the tournament. So I think that's going to be their set. And then just Indiana is another opponent in their way when it comes to that. So I agree. And Indiana, I think people are going to start to, and obviously we haven't seen a lot of games yet, but I think the team's going to perform better than maybe people were projecting at the beginning of the season. But they're still going to lose some games, despite of even the most optimistic people. They're still going to lose some games. So I think that's going to be where we start. Now, Maryland comes into town. So we've got a Maryland team that not sure, obviously, where they'll be at the end of January, Sunday, January 26th, but they're still going to be a good team, highly ranked at the moment. So I think the Hoosiers are going to split against Maryland. I had them losing at Maryland, but I think coming to Assembly Hall, I think they're going to be able to get the win. Being able, since they've seen the opponent, Maryland at times can be streaky, just historically with them the past few years. So I think Indiana's going to come in fired up after losing at Maryland and get the W. I'll kick it over to Nathan first.
Yeah, this Maryland team's pretty good, you guys. I think Indiana's going to have a tough time against the likes of, Jalen Smith and Anthony Cowan. These guys are really talented. I think this is where the top of the Big Ten will rock the Indiana Hoosiers boat a little bit. So I think Indiana's going to have some pair of home losses here, first to Michigan State and now Maryland.
I don't disagree with that. I could see that going either way. Matt, win, loss?
I think it's going to be a loss, though I did predict earlier that they were going to win at Maryland. So it's just the reverse of what Noah said. They're going to be PO'd and come into Bloomington. And look, like Noah said, Anthony Cowan's one of those streaky guards. And what happens to streaky guards when they enter onto McCracken Court? They just somehow explode for 25 points. And I feel like that's what's going to happen this game.
Okay, I will say that I asked for their prediction so I could write it down quicker ahead of time, and Matt told me that the game was going to be a win.
Whoops,
so shame on Matt for telling me that was going to be a win when he said a loss.
Hey, I do want to credit him for saying PO'd though. He didn't.
True.
I'm sorry.
True. Let's go on to at Penn State. Very end of January, Wednesday, January 29th at Penn State. Incredible. Front of a crowd that will be a total of media people. I think that's going to be that's going to be a win. I don't think there's much of a question. I think even all of the hype that Penn State has this year, I'm not buying into it as of Tuesday, November 12th. So as of this point, I don't think it's going to be much of a contest because I think the Hoosiers are going to be up and ready to go. Matt.
Yeah, Penn State basketball is terrible, so that's a win.
Yeah, so the way I think Penn State's going to be a really interesting team to keep your eye on this year. I'm actually kind of looking forward to their game against Georgetown on Thursday. But for now, I think Indiana goes into Penn State and wins that one against the Nittany Lions. It's going to be a very ugly, sort of real grinding type of game, but I think Indiana.
We lost Nathan there. That's okay. He just said he thinks Indiana's going to pull it out. So let's go on to at Ohio State, a game that is I could see. And now I'm going to preface my stuff by I don't think almost any game is out of reach for the Hoosiers this year. The only games might beat Michigan State depending on how dominant they actually turn out to be. I don't think any game is out of reach completely. But when we're going to go on the road to Ohio State, I think you still got a pretty good environment there, and I think the Hoosiers are going to – I had them winning the first game against Ohio State, and I have a lot of splits because a lot of the teams we play twice, that the Hoosiers play twice, are good teams, and I think it's going to be a lot of I'm looking at a lot of the home-away type of home crowd advantage, so I'm going to predict a loss against Ohio State. Nathan.
Same here. I think Ohio State's a really good team, and Indiana's going to have a tough time winning in Columbus.
Yeah, we're a trio here in agreement. Ohio State's just going to be a leg too far. Again, Chris Holtman's going to have his team ready to play in Columbus.
All right, let's go to a home game against Purdue. Is Indiana going to be able to get off of the past couple of years where Purdue has seemingly dominated the head-to-head matchup against Indiana. I am inclined to say yes, that the Purdue team is what we thought at least last year Purdue was going to be down. They ended up not being down. They were actually better than the year before. I think Purdue is starting to maybe come back to earth a tiny bit, and I think it's more of an even matchup compared to last year is my point. They're still going to be a good team. They lost to Texas already at the beginning of the year, but Texas is still going to be a pretty decent team. So I think it's going to be a more even matchup than the past 2 years, and I think Indiana is going to be able to pull it out at home. Matt.
Yeah, we got a week in between the Ohio State game and Purdue game, and Archie's going to have that amount of days in between in which IU basketball hasn't beat Purdue basketball plastered on the like all their lockers. They're going to be ready to go and riled up for this game. I would be surprised to see this be a 20-point blowout at home. I think the team is going to be pumped up and ready to go.
Yeah, I see it the same way. Maybe not the 20-point thing, but it's going to be a Saturday afternoon game where all the students are going to be jacked up and it's going to be like 20 degrees outside in February. Purdue's got, they're going to be interesting here. They lost that home game to Texas. They've got some really tough non-conference games coming up. A road game against Marquette. VCU is going to be good this year. Virginia, obviously, defending national champs and a great team. Every year there are a few teams that do a lot better than expected and a lot worse than expected. I'm not sure where Purdue's going to be in February, but I think IU will win that one.
Hey, those Virginia schools. Those Virginia schools will come up on you sometimes. All right, the next opponent, Thursday, February 13th, home against Iowa. I've started every time. Let's kick it over to Nathan first.
Well, I had Indiana losing back-to-back home games earlier in the season. Just earlier, I guess it would have been a few weeks prior to this. I think Indiana strings together back-to-back home wins here. After beating Purdue, I think they'll beat Iowa.
I also think they'll beat Iowa. And I think we'll get a Fran McCaffrey interesting face out of this game.
Always get an interesting and a new Fran McCaffrey face.
Well, and just what we saw yesterday, Iowa losing at home to DePaul by, 20 or 50? I think the final score was like much less than what it was the entire game. I think the final score was like 14 points or something. But it was a clubbing.
Yes, and we have not discussed the opening week for the Big Ten. It has not been pretty for half of the Big Ten in the opening week, and we've been nice on the podcast so far. I agree, a win. I don't think anyone knows where Iowa sits. Like, they could be pretty decent to where they're in the middle of the Big Ten, but they also could be at the bottom of the Big Ten. Iowa's a team that you honestly don't know where they are every year, but then I think you put just the injury at the beginning of the year, and then you see the loss that they had this already, but they've got components that they can get into like the bottom of the top 25s, but I think this is going to be a year that they're more towards the bottom compared to the middle towards the top. So yes, I agree. Indiana by a fair amount. Then they travel on the road. There's a lot of 2-game stretches, 2 home games, 2 away games. The next, there's a 2-game away stretch at Michigan, Sunday, February 16th. Despite where we don't know where Michigan is, it's another team that in 2 months we're going to see where they are. I still think that Indiana, going into Michigan is always hard for Indiana. It's one of those few spots that it's hard to get a victory. I think despite the opponents, like I said, there's not a game that they could that they could lose for sure. But I think they're still going to have to rack up losses somewhere, and I could just move those losses to various teams. I could see a bunch of different scenarios, but so I'm going to put it at a loss this week. Nathan, do you agree, or do you think the Hoosiers are going to be able to go into Michigan and pull out a victory?
Well, I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when I said Juwan Howard might have a tough time game planning for Indiana, and I think that's what's going to happen here. I'm not sure if Michigan's going to be able to slow down the multitude of different options that IU throws at them. I think IU is going to win in like a buzzer beater type situation here, and it might be one of those regular season games that we look back on and say, hey, maybe this game is why Indiana made the NCAA tournament. Who knows when it's all said and done, but I think IU wins this one in Ann Arbor, which we haven't said much recently.
I would love that if that were the case. I totally agree. Matt.
I have this hate-love relationship with Xavier Simpson where I watch him play and I love how he plays, but then I realize he's on Michigan and then I hate it. And he's going to play a really good game against us, and just like last year. And we're gonna lose at Michigan. But like, I'm not very high on Michigan this year, like other than Xavier Simpson. But I just don't think this game is in the stars for us.
All right, let's move on to at Minnesota, which is another team that you could see being pretty decent this year. It's just depending on how they're actually going to be able to pull things together. So Wednesday, February 19th, just a short turnaround for Michigan. So they're going to go home for a very brief amount of time, then go all the way to Minnesota. I'm again, like I said just before this, it's going to be where the losses come from. There are going to be a few losses, and we'll give you our overall record by the end of it. But I think this is where it's a tough stretch of the year. They've got some pretty hard opponents. Travel might get to them, so I'm going to predict a loss, even though I could see it moving elsewhere. Nathan, do you agree, or do you think Indiana's going to go into the barn and win?
No, I agree with you on this one. No, I think Indiana's going to have a tough time following up, in my eyes, an emotional win in Ann Arbor with another one in Minnesota. It's just a kind of a tough scheduling situation. Minnesota would have just played a home game against Iowa a few days earlier, so they stay at home for a few days. So I think this is just kind of one of those tough schedule losses. But again, Minnesota might be another one of those teams where going into the year, we think they're pretty good. They've already lost to Oklahoma. I don't know. The Big Ten, there's a lot of opportunities out there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I also agree. I think they're going to lose this game as well to Minnesota, so that'll be back-to-back road losses for the Hoosiers.
You are killing me, Matt. And you said a win against this game. You are
no. I didn't add the away to Minnesota, but we'll get to that in a minute.
You're going to mess all of my stuff up. I've been really good about trying to keep.
You know what? I got to keep you on
straight.
Your toes.
Yeah, apparently. All right, we'll get a home game against Penn State Sunday, February 23rd. They get to come back home for literally just one game before traveling to Purdue and Illinois. But Penn State, like we talked about earlier, I think it's the same thing. This time Penn State's coming home, so it's much more comfortable. So I predict a win. Matt?
I also predict a win. Again, Penn State basketball. Boo.
Yeah, I also have a win. By the way, if my math is right, when Indiana beats Michigan on February 16th, I have that as win number 20 for the Hoosiers on the season, which is always kind of that important milestone to reach. I think they get number 21 against Penn State.
Yep, you had it. Your 20th was Michigan. Yep, exactly. So they get 21 against Penn State. All right, as I try and catch up Matt's overall record, I have, this is my 20th game, 20th win on the season, and then 10 on the conference. So they reached the halfway point for the conference, and they reached 20 wins. So then the Hoosiers go on the road to West Lafayette Thursday, February 27th. This time, I think they're still going to split the home and away series with Purdue, home and home. So I'm going to predict the loss for them. Let's move it over to Matt. How do you think they're going to fare up in West Lafayette?
Yeah, Purdue's going to be mad. The student section is going to be upset that not only did we beat them in football, but now we've beaten them in basketball. So they're going to pack Mackey and be extra rowdy and obnoxious, and they're going to pull off a heartbreaking loss for us, but a fantastic win for Purdue.
Yeah, I've got Purdue winning this one. It's always tough to win at Mackey Arena unless you're Texas, I guess. But this will be a pretty tough game for Indiana to win. So disappointing you lose that rivalry game, but I think things still pretty steady.
Yeah.
If I think I did my quick math with moving wins and losses around. At this point in the season, at the end of February, both Matt and I are 20-8 overall and 10-7 on the conference. I just did this weird because we can't both be 10-7. Oh yes, and Nithin is 21-7 overall and 10-7 on the conference. So Nithin had an extra conference victory in there. So again, 20-8. Matt and I, 10-7, all of us on conference, 21-7, Nithin overall. So the last 3 games of the regular season, Hoosiers travel to Illinois Sunday, March 1st, the day before my birthday. I'm not sold on Illinois as a team just yet, so I think I think it's the same concept as a lot of, and the same thing we're going to talk next week about Michigan football, and this week with Penn State football. I'll believe it when I see it that the Hoosiers beat them. I think it's the reverse, that I'll believe it when I see it for Illinois typically not beating Indiana recently in basketball. I'm going to go by that statement, and I'm going to have a win against Illinois. Matt.
I am going to do the inverse of that and say this is going to be a loss to Illinois at Illinois. That is back-to-back road losses against rivals for the Hoosiers, and this is because scheduling. This is a very short turnaround from Purdue to Illinois, and it's a road game. And I'm sure Illinois at this point will be fighting for their lives to try to make it in the NCAA tournament while we're probably in the bracket handedly. So I'm going to say Purdue. I'm going to say Illinois is going to get the best of us in this game.
All right, Nathan, is Urbana-Champaign a place where Indiana's going to lose this year, or are they going to pull it out?
I think Illinois is going to end up winning this game. So I think IU is going to stumble in the fraudulent Assembly Hall, which I think is now the State Farm Center. Scheduling is a lot of it, Matt. And when I look at Illinois' situation, they get a home game against Nebraska, a road game against Northwestern before a home game against Indiana. So things kind of align nicely for Illinois before this one. So I've got the U of I.
All right, Minnesota Wednesday, March 4th, a small turnaround, but it's at home. The Hoosiers are home for the last two games. So the 4th of March as the month turns to the greatest month of the entire year where March Madness occurs. I'm going to kick it over to Matt first. Game against Minnesota at home.
Well, you can insert, in my timeline, you can insert the headlines, can Archie Miller coach in February and March? Because we've lost 4 of the last 5 games in my version of reality. And that's not going to be the case here because we're going to get revenge on Minnesota in Assembly Hall on March 4th and open up March with a win.
Well, we would have played a game in Illinois in March already, but
we're not going to count that. We're going to forget it. We got
March
short
1st
memory in March.
March 1st doesn't count. No, I think Indiana comes back to Assembly Hall, home cooking, and clobbers Minnesota after losing in Minneapolis earlier.
I agree. I think this is a game that, regardless of how the Hoosiers have done before, I think they're going to be able to take care of business at home against Minnesota. All right, the final game of the season, the final home game of the regular season, I should say, is against Wisconsin, a team that all of us predicted a loss at the very beginning of December when we had to travel on the road up to Madison. So Saturday, Saturday, March 7th. Their December was when they played at Wisconsin, but home Saturday, March 7th. I predict that they are going to finish the season strong with a victory, which means my overall record on the season is 23-8, and that would be an incredible record to have in Archie Miller's third year with a 13-7 record on the conference, which will not be too far away from first place, which will probably put them 3rd, 4th, or 5th, depending on how everyone goes. And I think it is going to be, which is a very successful season for Archie Miller. And I stand by that. That's not even an optimistic look. I think that is how the Hoosiers are probably going to be able to finish the season. Kick it over to Nathan.
Yeah, I think Indiana closes out the regular season with a win on Senior Day against Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin will score a few more in Madison, and I think Indiana will return the favor in Bloomington.
Yeah, this is going to be the ugliest game we play because Wisconsin just plays an ugly brand of basketball. It wins, but it's ugly. But I do think we pull this out in Bloomington on Senior Day and back-to-back home wins to end the season for the Hoosiers.
All right. So that will leave Matt at 22-9 overall with a 12-8 record in conference play. Nathan with a 23-8 overall record, the same as mine, but a 12-8 conference record as well. So both of us, all three of us, have about 12 or 13 wins, and I totally see that being reasonable for Indiana. 11, 12, 13 conference wins, depending on where you can place them. And so I had losses at Wisconsin, at Maryland, Michigan State, at Ohio State, at Michigan, at Minnesota, at Purdue. I really liked the home and away this year. Matt, at Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan State, Maryland, at Michigan, at Purdue, at Illinois, at Minnesota. Nathan, at Wisconsin, at Maryland, Michigan State, Maryland, at Ohio State, at Minnesota, at Purdue, at Illinois. So they're kind of spread out throughout the teams this year, which I think says a little bit to how Indiana could be doing and how big of a question mark a lot of the opposing teams in the Big Ten are this year. All right, right before we move into our last segment of the evening in our very long and nice podcast, thank you for staying with us as we move into a football segment. If you guys haven't subscribed to our show yet, you guys can subscribe to our show for free on whatever platforms you listen to podcasts. So just search for The Hoosier Sound or hang with us live on YouTube, typically 8:30 p.m. on Tuesday evenings if there's not a basketball game. At The Hoosier Sound, at Indiana HQ, Twitter, and Facebook. That's where we give all of our news and updates, so check us out. IndianaHQ.com if you need to find all of that in one place, if you don't remember what I just said. So let's move into some more football talk. The game that we have circled on our calendar, sort of kind of, for a while. Penn State, the Hoosiers get to travel all the way to Pennsylvania in a very hard opposing stadium, obviously, which I would assume you can just see a bunch of white. But this Saturday, the 16th of November, it is a noon game, but we get the ABC slot, which will also be aired on ESPN since they have their partnership. So noon on ABC/ESPN. Right now, the ESPN matchup predictor has Indiana with a 10% chance to win. The line at the time of recording this podcast is the Hoosiers down by 15, so it has moved 1 point in favor of Penn State, which we'll talk about in a second, but the over-under is 54.5. That has also increased. Penn State, if you take out the fluff games, has beaten, at the time, number 17 Iowa, number 16 Michigan, and beaten at Michigan State. And then the entire year, they were looking like this unstoppable force next to Ohio State, just half a tier lower. And then PJ Fleck talked about diamonds on Friday night. And lo and behold, Minnesota comes in and, well, they don't come in. Penn State comes in and they beat Minnesota 31-26. Penn State never led during the entire game. And now Penn State finds themselves scrambling to try and keep pace for the college football playoffs, which does not look very good at all. And if you did not get my diamonds reference, so apparently, long story short, this is kind of genius. He told his team on Friday night, he talked about how diamonds were built and how it's just literally tons and tons and tons of pressure until a diamond is built. So he had everyone write down something in their life that has that pressure has helped them with. Basically, long story short, put it in a bucket overnight. They sealed it up. They came back the next day. He pulled out a diamond and said, all of your pressure is going to help you play flawless today. And lo and behold, the team did not trail once during the game, and it worked. It worked. So maybe Tom Allen just needs to talk about diamonds this Friday night. But
that man is
S&P Plus, yeah, hey, it worked. Right now, Indiana moved up in the overall S&P Plus rankings. Computers and humans think Indiana is in the top 25 overall ranking at 19th. They moved up 4 spots.
Those lizard people from the playoff committee don't think we are. So
yes, apparently not. But offense down 1 spot, down to 1 spot at 15th. Defense up a few spots to 35. Special teams up in the top 10 to 9th. Move over to Penn State. They are 7th overall in S&P, 11th in offense. So the computers think our offense and defense are right next to each other. Defense 8th. Special teams 14th. Indiana has a better math-rated special teams than Penn State. Woo! Go for it. Right now, Penn State is averaging 37.1 points per game, 433 yards per game, most of it in the air, but a good majority of it on the ground. Their defense only allowing 12 points per game, but they give up 300 yards per game, most of that in the air. They don't give up a lot of rush yards. So I'm going to kick over this preview this maybe shorter preview over to Nathan before we talk about if Indiana has a chance, since he wrote the article. So go check that out, indianahq.com. He did all the research. Give him credit. It's a great read, a lot of great information. So Nathan, what are we to expect from Penn State this Saturday?
Yeah, it was a Christian tag team effort. My brother was primarily responsible, but it's all good though. No, it's going to be a fun one on Saturday, right? I mean, even when you talk about Penn State being a 15-ish point favorite, and I think that number may have just dropped to 14.5. But
since looking at
it depends on where you look at the end of the day.
Yep.
But even that, whatever, 2-score spread, it's not like people are expecting Penn State to just beat the pants off of Indiana. You look at the Ohio State spread over Rutgers, it's like 50-something points, where the Buckeyes are favorites, and even Clemson's like a 38-point favorite against Wake Forest. So it's not like that.
Crazy to me.
Yeah, Indiana's supposed, and remember, Wake Forest was ranked up until last week. So Indiana's not expected to just get blasted by Penn State. But look, the Nittany Lions are a really good football team, and after losing to Minnesota, they are going to be chomping at the bit to come out on Saturday afternoon in Happy Valley. And that's why I think the start of the game is going to be really important for IU. A couple of years ago, they went into Penn State and Saquon Barkley returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown. And at the end of the first quarter, the score was 28-0. And you're not going to even sniff a comeback at that point. So Indiana's got to start fast. Penn State's got a good set of skill players on offense. Sean Clifford's a good quarterback. I'm not going to put him at the same level as Trace McSorley just yet, but Clifford's a smart QB. He's a dual threat. You got to watch out for his running ability. I think his 40 time is like a 4.5 or something. I remember hearing about it a long time ago. So he's pretty quick on his feet. KJ Hamler, the sophomore receiver, is really good. He's got over 700 receiving yards this year. He's out yarded and out touchdown Whop Filio, for example, who we all know has had a great season for Indiana. So Hamler's going to be a problem for IU secondary. Pat Freiermuth is a really good tight end. At the end of the day, look, Indiana's going to have to try to limit the big plays as much as possible from the Penn State standpoint, and then try to get them on offense. I think Kalen DeBoer, let's see what you got, man. You've been really good for Indiana so far this year. Let's see what you can do against a really, really good defense. Man, their front seven. You look at some of those names: Yetur Gross-Matos and Shaka Tony and Micah Parsons. If you guys don't know those names right now, look them up, because by Saturday you're going to be sick of hearing them getting tackles or getting sacks. And there's going to be some of those. Indiana's just going to have to shake off the bad plays and try to hit on more good ones. But I'll tell you this too. When it's all said and done, I think Penn State, to an extent, they're a really good team. I think they've overachieved just a little bit. So when the key to this game on Saturday is when Indiana gets their chances, that they really capitalize. They score touchdowns instead of field goals, that they don't drop passes, that they don't commit stupid penalties. I think that's going to be really important. And when it's all said and done, I don't think Penn State is in the same league as Ohio State. And I think you're going to find that out this week. And I think you're going to find it out next week when those two teams play in Columbus. Indiana is going to be in the game. They have to just capitalize on the key moments in order to win.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
No, I was going to ask you, I was like, so Matt, so does Indiana go and have your prediction where you think Indiana is going to beat Penn State, or do you think you've changed your mind still after recent events have happened?
Yeah, I've changed my mind a little bit. However, if my prediction is to come true, the key to the game for the Hoosiers is pressure. Sean Clifford was pressured against Minnesota. Minnesota did a really good job of getting to the quarterback. He threw 3 interceptions in that game due to pressure on Sean Clifford. And what did we not talk about when we were highlighting the offense? Because we said he had really good skill players, is their offensive line. If there's one place you can get to Penn State on the team, it's the offensive line. So if Indiana can bring good pressure, what I mean by good pressure, I mean, we like to blitz safeties and corners a lot, or, we have our Husky position that likes to blitz a lot that we talk about. But, we can't let people go one-on-one wide open or without coverage straight off the bat, because Sean Clifford will find them. But if we bring good pressure and cover everybody, there's a very good chance we can keep this game within a 1 or 2 score game going into the fourth quarter. And then if we have a chance, we can win. However, that is a tough task because KJ Hamler is a superstar. He is so good. Just like as good as Watt is for IU, KJ Hamler is on that next level. And he's the sophomore wide receiver for Penn State. So the key to the game is getting pressure on Sean Clifford and limiting big plays from KJ Hamler. He's going to get his touches, but make sure that he doesn't bust one for 65 yards and a touchdown.
Yep. So the way Minnesota was able to beat Penn State more or less in a very, very, very spark-noted summary was they basically just they were able to be efficient in their passing. And if there's a quarterback that can talk about efficient passing that Indiana has had in the past couple of years, his name is Peyton Ramsey. He's efficient at his passing. So it's going to be if he's going to be able to stop the Penn State defense. So I think the home field advantage for Penn State is really going to play a factor into it. They're right in the middle of an away stint. They're going to play Ohio State next week. Whether or not they are fired up about losing and they're going to come in angry, or they're licking their wounds when IU is licking their chops, or they're going to look at Ohio State. Depends on how Indiana, I think, comes out, and it's just going to all be up to Indiana, I think, if they can take care of their own business at this point, or they can lose it themselves. So, Nathan, do you still think Indiana's going to pull it out, or do you think Penn State's going to come away?
No, I think Indiana's going to keep it close, but it just feels like a game where there's a little bit too tall of a mountain to climb in this one. I think Indiana keeps it close, and then Penn State gets a late touchdown or two and ends up winning something like 34-20. That's the prediction I had officially in our Indiana HQ preview that was published earlier tonight. So I think Penn State wins this one, but it would not stun me by any means if Indiana found a way to win this game. I think it's a winnable game. I just think there's a lot going up against Indiana in this one.
Matt?
I didn't put my prediction in on the article for this week. I'm sorry, I forgot it. But I'll give my prediction now. I'm going to say it's 34-30 Penn State. I do think we keep the streak of scoring 30 points alive. And that means Kalen DeBoer is going to get his bonus. But I don't think the defense is going to do enough and get enough pressure on clean pressure on Sean Clifford in order to keep us in the game. And there'll be a last 2-minute touchdown that's just going to be pure Indiana football of the last 20 years. It's going to crush our souls. So that's a wonderful prediction.
Yep. I don't think Indiana is going to come away with it, but I don't think that's something to be nervous about. I don't think that should take away from the feelings that we've had this entire season. Again, Penn State is still on a different tier no matter what's happened the past couple of weeks. So whatever happens on Saturday, still be excited about this Hoosier team. Be ready for Michigan to come in to Memorial Stadium. Be ready for that Purdue game and whatever bowl place that they can go. I don't think this Saturday is going to be indicative of how they can finish the season or what the type of season that they have already had. So we'll talk about that next week, what the outcome eventually is, but that's going to wrap it up for our 115th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. We will be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. News and updates come through Twitter, so when we have to come on late, you check out there so we can tell you all about our updates. Subscribe to our show so you don't miss out on those weekly episodes. Most importantly, though, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review. iTunes or Facebook is usually the best place. Tell a friend, share our links. Your support is how we grow this podcast so we can reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But, as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.